Below the forgotten crypts of St. Jude's Cemetery, a creature of nightmare was chained inside a solid iron coffin. They left him there to starve for eternity. He was a monster to the world, but to the blind girl walking above, his desperate whispers sounded exactly like salvation. If you look through the historical archives of Duxbury, Massachusetts, around the year 1894, you will find careful records of a wealthy industrialist named Alistair Ashford. According to the town ledgers, Ashford was a kind man who gave a great deal of money. He paid for the local orphanage all by himself. He paid for the cobblestone roads. He even paid for the big county hospital. But in late October of that year, the records suddenly say that Ashford sold everything he owned and ran away to Europe in the middle of the night, never to come back. That is the official story. The truth, however, is buried much deeper, about 6 feet under the stone floor of the abandoned Vanderbilt family mausoleum. Alistair Ashford did not board a ship to Europe. He was a vampire king, an ancient being who had grown tired of violence and only wanted a quiet, peaceful life in the New World. For many years he had lived calmly, hiding what he truly was, and drinking only the blood of animals from his large farms. But human greed is often worse than any creature of the night. The town's rich leaders, led by Mayor Reginald Cobble and Dr. Arthur Pendleton, found out Alistair's secret. They did not discover it by being brave detectives. They found it by sneaking into his private medical journals like cowards. When they realized Alistair could live forever and had hundreds of years of saved money, they made a wicked plan. They knew they could not simply shoot or stab a vampire of his royal blood. So they invited him to a fancy Thanksgiving dinner. They put high amounts of liquid silver and dead man's blood into his wine. That mixture stops a vampire from moving. As Alistair fell down, unable to move, but still wide awake, Cobble and Pendleton took his house keys. They tied him with heavy silver chains mixed with iron. Then they dragged him to St. Jude's Cemetery. They locked him inside a solid iron coffin, welded the edges shut, and buried him alive under the mausoleum. They wanted him to feel the worst pain possible, an immortal creature slowly drying up and starving in total darkness forever, while they got fat and rich from his money. For 3 long, terrible months, Alistair lay in the thick blackness. His skin turned dry like old paper. His great strength faded away to nothing. The heavy iron pressed on his chest, and the silence drove him almost mad. He screamed until his voice broke, but no one could hear him through the iron, the 6 feet of packed dirt, and the heavy stone floor above. No one, that is, except Hazel. Hazel Bennett was 20 years old. She had been completely blind since a bad case of scarlet fever took her sight when she was 7. She had no parents and no money, so she lived on the very edge of Duxbury society. To stay alive, Hazel worked for the local medicine shop owner, Mr. Elias Harland. She wove baskets and searched for rare plants. Because she could not see, Hazel's other senses had grown very strong, almost like magic. She could name the exact kind of flower just by the soft feel of its petals. She could walk through the thick woods by listening to how the wind moved around the tree trunks. Her favorite place to look for plants was St. Jude's Cemetery. The dirt there was very rich and grew the best night-blooming jasmine and valerian root in the whole county. It was quiet and peaceful, and the dead never made fun of her torn clothes or her cloudy, sightless eyes. On a freezing Tuesday night in late January, Hazel was kneeling on the cold marble floor of the ruined Vanderbilt Mausoleum. She was carefully feeling the cracks in the stone, looking for a special kind of moss that Harland paid extra money for. As her bare fingers brushed against the deep crack in the marble, a crack made by the ground settling after the hurried burial under it, she felt a strange vibration. It was not the rumble of a passing carriage. It was a steady, desperate rhythm. Hazel pressed her ear against the freezing stone. Her forehead wrinkled. Under the layers of rock and dirt, she could hear a faint metal scraping sound, and then a sound that made her heart jump. It was a voice, a man's voice, rough, broken, and terribly weak. The sound vibrated up through the crack in the earth. "Is anyone?" Most people would have run away screaming, thinking it was a ghost or a demon. But Hazel's life had taught her that the real monsters were the men who walked past beggars in the street, and the boys who threw stones at her because she was blind. The voice under the stone did not sound evil. It sounded deeply, heartbreakingly alone. Hazel leaned closer to the crack and cupped her hands around her mouth so the sound would go straight down. "I hear you," she whispered into the dark. "Who are you?" Down in the choking dark of the iron coffin, Alistair Ashford stopped moving. For 90 days he had felt only the endless pain of his terrible hunger and the total silence of the grave. He thought his mind had finally broken. He thought the voice of an angel was only a dream of rescue. "Please," Alistair said in a rough voice, using every last bit of his special power to push his words up the narrow air crack that the careless gravediggers had left open by mistake. "My name is Alistair. I am buried under you. They locked me in. Please, you must bring help." Above the ground, Hazel sat back on her heels, her mind racing. Alistair. The town had been told that the great kind man Alistair Ashford had moved to France months ago. "Mr. Ashford," Hazel called down, keeping her voice low so it would not travel across the cemetery. "Mayor Cobble took over your house and land." A bitter, dry laugh came up through the crack, sounding like dry autumn leaves crumbling. "Cobble, that lying coward, he poisoned me. He stole everything, and he buried me alive in this iron box." Hazel's hands shook. The meanness of it was huge. She did not doubt him for even a second. She had heard Mayor Cobble laugh at poor people and kick stray dogs into the street herself. The idea that he would kill a man for his money made perfect, terrible sense. "I need to go to the police," Hazel said, starting to stand up. "I'll bring the sheriff, Mr. Ashford. Hold on." "No." The fear in Alistair's voice was so strong it made the stone under Hazel's knees shake. "The sheriff is Cobble's cousin. They are all part of it, little one. If you tell them, they will know I am still alive. They will dig me up, just to burn me to ashes. You cannot tell anyone." Hazel knelt back down, her fingers holding tight to her thin shawl. "Then how do I get you out?" "I'm blind, Mr. Ashford. I'm a poor blind girl. I don't have the strength to dig through a stone floor and 6 feet of frozen dirt." A heavy silence fell between them. Down in the dark, Alistair felt a wave of deep sadness. A blind girl. Fate had sent him someone with a pure heart, but without the strong body needed to break through the iron. Yet as he used his sharp vampire hearing, he could hear the fast, kind beating of her heart. He could smell the soft scent of jasmine and rain on her skin. "What is your name?" Alistair asked, his voice growing softer, dropping the strong tone of a king and speaking like a dying man. "Hazel. Hazel Bennett." "Hazel, you have already saved me just by answering. To know I am not screaming into empty nothing. It is a kindness I can never pay back. But you must go. If they find you here talking to the ground, they will kill you too." "I'm not leaving you," Hazel said with strong feeling. She had been left alone by the world. She knew exactly how it felt to be left in the dark. "I may not be able to dig you out tonight, but I am not leaving you to die. What do you need? How can I keep you alive until we figure this out?" Alistair paused. To stay alive, to get even a little of his strength back so he could break the iron from inside, he needed one thing: blood. But how could he ask this kind girl for such a strange thing? If he told her what he truly was, she would surely run away. I am very dry inside, Hazel. I need something to drink, but not food." "Water?" she asked, reaching for her water bottle. "No," Alistair said, feeling shame in his dry words. "Hazel, I must tell you something. I am not fully human. If I were, I would have stopped breathing in this box months ago. I am a vampire. Please don't run." Hazel did not run. She sat in the freezing cemetery, thinking about the impossible words. A vampire. The stories from her childhood spoke of mean, blood-drinking monsters. Yet this man had built the hospital where her mother was cared for before she died. He had built the orphanage that gave Hazel a place to stay during the coldest winters. If this was a monster, he was a very kind one. "You need blood," Hazel said in a calm, clear voice. Alistair was surprised by how steady she was. "Yes, animal blood will be enough. Anything. If I have enough, I may get enough strength to break these silver chains. But the crack is too thin to pass anything solid. I work for a medicine shop and I help the local butcher clean his shop on Thursdays in exchange for leftover scraps," Hazel figured out quickly. "I can get pig's blood. I can pour it down this crack in the stone. Will it reach you?" "The crack leads straight to a broken edge in the iron box. Yes, it will reach me." Over the next 3 weeks, a strange, beautiful, and dangerous routine began. Every night at midnight, Hazel would walk the dangerous snow-covered paths to St. Jude's Cemetery. She secretly brought glass bottles filled with fresh animal blood and carefully poured the red liquid down the narrow crack in the Vanderbilt crypt. As the blood seeped into the iron coffin, Alistair drank from the rusty edges. With each passing night, his strength slowly came back. His dry skin healed, his muscles grew, and the painful fog in his mind cleared. And as he healed in his body, something else grew between them. Because she could not see him, and he could not see her, they fell in love, through pure talking. Alistair told Hazel about the grand cities of Europe, the smell of the ocean near Marseilles, and the exact color of the sunset over the Alps. He painted a bright world for her inside her mind. In return, Hazel taught him how to really listen. She described the music of the town waking up, the feel of frost on the gravestones, and the strong heart needed to live in a world that refused to look at her. Alistair realized that for 300 years he had walked the earth with his eyes wide open, yet he had never truly seen the beauty of the world until a blind girl described it to him. "When I get out of here, Hazel," Alistair whispered one night, his voice now rich, deep, and very smooth, "I will give you the world. I will take you to every place I have described, and I will make those men pay for what they took from us." Hazel leaned against the cold stone, a sad smile on her lips. "They won't let us just walk away, Alistair. You don't know what happened today." Down below, Alistair's newly strong muscles tightened against his silver chains. "What happened, my love?" "Dr. Pendleton came into the medicine shop," Hazel said, her voice shaking a little. "I heard him talking to Harland. They have been searching your house for 3 months for the key to your underground vault in Boston. They can't find it. Pendleton thinks you swallowed it before they poisoned you." Alistair's eyes opened wide in the total black. He had swallowed it. "Pendleton told Harland they are coming to the cemetery tomorrow night," Hazel whispered, a tear falling from her sightless eyes. "They are bringing big hammers, Alistair. They are going to dig you up, cut you open to get the key, and then burn your body to ash. We are out of time." The freezing wind howled through the gravestones of St. Jude's Cemetery, bringing the bitter promise of a big snowstorm. It was Wednesday night, less than 24 hours since Hazel had warned Alistair of the coming attack. She stood bravely in the middle of the ruined Vanderbilt Mausoleum, her thin wool coat giving no protection against the sharp cold. She had nowhere else to go, and even if she did, she would never leave the man buried under her feet. For hours, the only sound had been the scraping of bare branches against the stone walls. Then Hazel's sharp hearing picked up the crunch of heavy boots on the snow, followed by the metal clinking of pickaxes, shovels, and iron bars. They were coming. "Mr. Ashford," Hazel whispered in a hurry, dropping to her knees and pressing her lips against the crack in the marble. "They are here. I hear at least 5 men. Please, tell me you have your strength." Down in the choking darkness of the iron coffin, Alistair pulled hard against the heavy silver chains around his wrists and chest. The animal blood Hazel had given him over the past 3 weeks had healed his dry flesh, and cleared his mind. But it was not enough. Animal blood was only a weak copy of real life. It did not have the strong, living energy needed to beat the burning pain of pure silver. Every time he tried to flex his muscles, the silver burned into his skin, hissing and smoking in the closed space. "Hazel, you must run," Alistair's voice came up, full of real fear, not for himself, but for her. "I cannot break the silver. The animal blood is too weak. If they find you here, they will not be kind. Run into the woods. Hide, my love." "I told you," Hazel said, her voice shaking but firm. "I am not leaving you in the dark." Before Alistair could beg her again, the heavy iron gates of the mausoleum screamed open on rusty hinges. "Well, well, what do we have here?" The voice belonged to Mayor Reginald Cobble. It was full of proud amusement, thick with the smell of expensive brandy and cheap cigars. Beside him stood Dr. Arthur Pendleton, carrying a leather doctor bag that rattled with bone saws and cutting tools. Behind them walked three big strong men from the local docks, hired for their muscles and their ability to keep quiet. But there was a fourth man with them, and when he spoke, Hazel's heart broke. "I told you she was sneaking out at night," Mr. Elias Harland, the medicine shop owner, said in a nervous voice. "I followed her last week. She's been talking to the ground, Mayor. I swear it." "You sold me out for what, Mr. Harland?" Hazel asked, her sightless eyes staring straight ahead. "A handful of silver coins?" "Get out of the way, you blind beggar," Harland spat, stepping back to let the dock workers pass. Mayor Cobble stepped forward, his heavy boots echoing on the marble. "Move along, Hazel. You're trespassing on private town property. We have some structural repairs to make to the foundation." "There is a man buried under here," Hazel screamed, hoping the sound would reach the road, even though she knew it was miles away. "Mayor Cobble poisoned Alistair Ashford and buried him alive. Murderers." Cobble's face instantly lost its smile. He snapped his fingers. "Shut her up. Now." One of the dock workers lunged forward, grabbed Hazel roughly by the hair, and threw her across the mausoleum. She hit the stone wall with a sickening thud. A sharp cry left her lips before she fell to the floor. A deep cut opened on her forehead, and a stream of warm red blood ran down her pale face, dripping onto the icy marble floor right beside the crack. 6 feet below, in the choking silence of the coffin, Alistair heard her scream. The sound cut through his soul like a sharp blade. For 300 years, he had controlled his monster side, hiding his hunting instincts under a mask of polite life. But hearing the only pure thing in his world being hurt, stripped away every bit of his humanity. Then a single drop of Hazel's blood fell through the crack. It hit the rusty lid of the iron coffin and seeped through the opening. As the scent reached Alistair's senses, time stopped. Human blood, her blood, full of fear, adrenaline, and unmatched love, acted like a powerful spark. The scent alone was like a huge blast of ancient power to a starving vampire king. His eyes, which had been a dull human brown, lit up into a terrifying glowing red. The paralysis from the dead man's blood disappeared, wiped away by the pure, fierce energy of a predator protecting its mate. Up above, Mayor Cobble waved impatiently at the floor. "Smash it open. Dig him up. Dr. Pendleton needs to cut the vault key out of his miserable stomach before the sun comes up." The dock workers raised their heavy hammers and brought them down on the marble floor. Crack! The old stone split. They swung again. Crash! The floor fell in, showing the frozen, packed dirt below. For 30 long minutes they dug with shovels and pickaxes, throwing heavy chunks of frozen earth over their shoulders, while Hazel lay half awake in the corner, her head spinning, silently praying for a miracle. "I hear metal," one of the workers grunted, his shovel hitting the heavy iron lid. "Excellent," Dr. Pendleton said, stepping to the edge of the pit and opening his doctor bag. He pulled out a heavy, jagged bone saw. "Sweep the dirt off the welded edges. Bring the crowbars." Down below, Alistair felt the dirt move. The pressure on the lid grew lighter. He looked at the heavy silver chains wrapping his chest and arms. They were burning his flesh, but he no longer felt the pain. He only felt total, blinding rage. He took a slow, deep breath, expanding his chest. Snap! Alistair flexed his arms with unimaginable, special force. The silver chains, made to hold a beast, groaned, stretched, and then broke into dozens of pieces, falling uselessly in the dark. He was free. The 3 dockworkers pushed heavy iron crowbars under the lid of the coffin. Mayor Cobble stood at the edge of the 6-foot grave, holding a kerosene lantern to light the prize. "On 3, Cobble ordered, his eyes wide with greed. 1, 2, 3, heave! The men pushed down on the crowbars. The welded edges, already rusty and weak from the winter wetness, groaned loudly and snapped. "We got it!" the largest worker shouted. "Pull the lid back!" They grabbed the heavy iron lid and pulled it backward, expecting to find the dried, decaying body of Alistair Ashford. Cobble leaned over the pit, a winning grin on his face, ready to claim the key to endless riches. But the coffin was empty. Cobble blinked, lowering the lantern into the grave. "What the? Where is he? He was right!" Before Cobble could finish his sentence, a hand shot out from the shadows of the pit. It was not the weak, thin hand of a starved man. It was a blur of raw, terrifying power. Fingers like steel clamps closed around the throat of the largest dockworker. In a fraction of a second, the 250-pound man was violently pulled down into the grave. A sickening, wet crunch echoed through the mausoleum, followed instantly by total silence. Panic broke out. The remaining 2 dockworkers scrambled backward, dropping their tools. Dr. Pendleton dropped his bone saw, his face turning white. "Impossible," he whispered. "The poison! The silver!" From the depths of the iron pit, a figure rose. Alistair Ashford floated out of the grave, his feet touching the broken marble floor without making a single sound. It was a terrifying sight. His fine suit was ruined, hanging in rags over his body. His skin was pale as moonlight, smeared with dirt and the fresh blood of the dockworker. But it was his eyes that froze the men in place, burning, unholy red, showing a fury beyond the human world. "Pendleton," Alistair said, his voice a dark, booming sound that shook the dust from the ceiling. "Cobble, you have interrupted my rest." The 2 remaining dockworkers screamed and ran for the heavy iron doors. Alistair did not even look at them. He merely flicked his wrist. The massive iron gates slammed shut with the force of a cannon blast, the metal lock twisting and melting together under his mind power. "No, no, no!" Mayor Cobble shrieked, backing away and pulling a silver-plated gun from his coat. He fired 3 times. Bang, bang, bang. The bullets hit Alistair square in the chest. He did not even flinch. He stepped forward, the wounds already closing, pushing the flattened silver bullets out onto the floor with soft clinks. Alistair moved faster than the human eye could follow. He appeared directly in front of Dr. Pendleton. The doctor let out a high-pitched cry before Alistair's hand wrapped around his jaw. "You wanted to look inside my stomach, Doctor," Alistair whispered, his fangs growing long and gleaming like polished ivory in the lantern light. "Let us see what is inside yours." Hazel, lying in the corner, covered her ears, but she could not block out the wet, tearing sounds or the short, horrible screams that followed. She pressed her face against the freezing marble, shaking hard. She was not afraid of Alistair, but the pure, brutal violence of the act was overwhelming. It was the sound of nature balancing the scales, a predator finally set free upon those who had hurt him. Within 90 seconds, the mausoleum was dead silent, except for the heavy, ragged breathing of Mr. Elias Harland. The medicine shop owner was backed into a corner, crying uncontrollably, begging for his life. Alistair slowly turned toward Harland, his face a mask of cold revenge. He took a step forward. "Stop." The voice was very weak, but to Alistair's ears It rang out like a church bell. He stopped instantly, the bloodlust fading as he looked toward the corner. Hazel was trying to push herself up, her sightless eyes wide, blood still leaking from her forehead. The red glow faded from Alistair's eyes, returning to a warm, gentle brown. The monster vanished, and the gentleman returned. He crossed the room in a blur, dropping to his knees beside her. He carefully took off his torn overcoat and wrapped it around her shivering shoulders. "I am here, Hazel," Alistair whispered softly, his cold hands gently holding her face. He checked the cut on her forehead, his thumb carefully wiping away the blood. "I am so sorry you had to hear that. I promise to protect you." Hazel leaned into his touch. His hands were freezing, but they felt safer than anything she had ever known. "Are they? They will never hurt anyone again," Alistair said quietly. He looked over his shoulder at the cowering medicine shop owner. "Mr. Harland, you are going to go to the sheriff. You are going to tell him that Mayor Cobble and Dr. Pendleton were murdered by grave robbers, and that you barely escaped with your life. If you ever speak Hazel's name, or mine, I will not need to hunt you down. I will simply wait in the dark of your bedroom." Harland nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, grave robbers, I swear it." Alistair easily lifted Hazel into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "We are leaving Duxbury, Hazel, tonight." "Where will we go?" she asked, resting her head against his shoulder, tiredness finally winning. "First to Boston," Alistair replied, carrying her out of the ruined mausoleum and into the blinding winter snowstorm. "I have a vault at the old Colony Trust Company that Mayor Cobble was too foolish to open. And then, I promised you the world. We shall start with the coast of Marseille." Historical records from the late 19th century hold a very strange note. In February of 1895, a man who looked exactly like the supposedly vanished Alistair Ashford walked into the Old Colony Trust Company in Boston. He showed a unique skeleton key stained by stomach acid, withdrew over $4 million in gold-bearer bonds, and disappeared completely. 3 days later, passenger lists for the RMS Umbria, sailing out of New York for the shores of Europe, listed a Mr. A. Ashford, traveling in the first-class rooms, accompanied by a young, legally blind woman listed simply as his bride. Back in Duxbury, the town fell into chaos, with Mayor Cobble and Dr. Pendleton found brutally cut apart in the cemetery. The town's corrupt leaders fell apart. The fortune they had stolen was taken by the state, and the town never fully regained its old glory. The iron coffin under the Vanderbilt Mausoleum was removed and melted down, the townspeople desperate to erase the terrifying proof of whatever beast had escaped it. But the legend remained. To this day, if you visit the snow-covered ruins of St. Jude's Cemetery in the dead of winter, the local people will tell you not to stand too close to the ancient crypts. They say that if you listen closely to the cracks in the stone, you might hear the faint, echoing whispers of the monster who was buried alive, and the brave blind girl who loved him enough to set him free. Did Alistair and Hazel truly disappear into the European sunset? History shows Alistair's huge fortune vanished overnight, and a blind girl from Duxbury was never seen again. One important lesson this story quietly teaches us is about the power of kindness and listening when the world seems dark. People who cannot see with their eyes often develop other senses that help them understand the world in deeper ways, just as Hazel did. Scientists today know that the human brain can rewire itself after the loss of one sense, making hearing, touch, and even smell stronger. This is called sensory compensation. It reminds us that every person has unique strengths, and true strength is not always about physical power. Sometimes, the greatest courage is simply refusing to leave someone alone in the dark. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe so you don't miss my next video.